Yeah. Watching.
Rounding up the humorous stuff in the news about Mormons. Can't wait to see which one will they choose.
That's right. What's up, everybody? Hello. Welcome to This Week in Mormons, the single greatest Latter-day Saint news-focused niche podcast perhaps ever created. Is that hyperbolic to state? I don't think it is. Glad to be here with all of you. It's been a long time. I'm Geoff Openshaw.
And I'm Jared Gillens.
Yeah.
Who knew? Just a few months later that we'd be back and
Well, we were. It had been a
staging
while.
a coup against Kurt.
It had been a while since you and I had really gotten together to have our own echo chamber and publish it to other people, and so I've needed that in my life now. Because I'm sure Kurt, of course, the proprietor of This Week in Mormons, has undoubtedly grown this show exponentially. There's a strong likelihood 75% of you have no idea who I am, right? Or Jared, for that matter. So, yeah. So just in some weird, if you don't, I'm Geoff Openshaw. I'm the founder of This Week in Mormons, and then I stopped with it. I gave it to Kurt. I said, "This is my gift to you."
I thought you sold it, and I heard it was like a big, like it was almost like a Twitter acquisition level.
Dude, it was like a dope tax write-off. Let me tell you, can't wait for that return this year. It's going to be lit. just some fry sauce. It's going to be awesome, man. So,
and just to give a little context, I'm Jared Gillens, who I was just occasionally a co-host, maybe about once a month, and then
you're pretty consistent.
Yeah, about once a month I'd come on. Geoff had a rotation of loyal echo chambery co-hosts that he'd bring on to just make sure we built up his ego and didn't challenge him in any way.
Yes.
So I'm one of those,
exactly.
and I guess I massaged his ego well enough that he invited me back, particularly for this comeback episode.
Yeah, don't call it a comeback. Here we are. It's so it's fun to. I'm rusty though, man. Being out, doing it for like 13 years, and then stopping and enjoying the past many months of not doing it. I hope I still have the mojo about me.
How long has it been? When did you stop?
It was the end of September.
I was gonna say it seems like October-ish.
Yeah, it was because it was before conference. We didn't get in like a conference recap.
That's why I remember, because I remember being like, "Oh, we're not doing a conference recap episode because Geoff doesn't have this show anymore."
It was kind of right up on it. We announced the changeover. We still published temple predictions, which were like, at this point, I don't even know what you can predict with that. With President Nelson, he's just doing whatever he wants.
Just throw darts at the non-blue areas of a map, and you could,
something like that. Yeah. So it's been a little while. Good few months though. We had our baby girl. That was great. Good times.
Yeah,
she's doing
right.
Fine. I got to enjoy
and
something.
Your wife's doing well too.
Yeah, Daniel's doing fine. Just getting through all that. And,
are the boys enjoying being big brothers to a little sister?
Yeah, thankfully number 3 has not had any weird issues with it. That's the one you always worry about, but he's been mostly fine. Yeah. I did something called paternity leave, which was very exciting.
You have that happens in the United States. I didn't know that.
Here and there, my company is cool, man. So I took a month off. So I took a month off and started a couple of day project to refresh our powder room on the main level, which I'm still working on. Yes.
A couple days later.
It's always something. And someday we'll get it where it's close. I don't know.
Cool.
Yeah, man. How's your life been?
It's good. I joined a choir, which is fun. Like, it's a community choir. It's not, church based, although it's Eastern Idaho.
Is it mostly? Yeah.
I was going to say we have our rehearsals in a LDS chapel, but the director, is LDS, but he's a choir director at high school in Rigby. And he just wanted to, make a community choir. And my sister-in-law and brother-in-law are good friends with him. And they said, Jared, you should go check this out. And I've been enjoying it. I haven't been in like a serious, like non-ward choir for since high school, really. So it's been a little bit of a, trying to get my choir. I don't even know, just trying to, get back into that kind of a mode, but I've enjoyed it, and it's been like a nice way. I make music with people and get to know and meet new people, and so that's the big thing in my life. I'm a choir boy again.
Do the millennial choirs have a presence in Eastern? Are you familiar with the formerly Mormon choral organization, but then they got rid of it? They ironically stopped being called Mormon because the church asked them to, and then the church now why would the church actually care if they reverted? I don't know.
Who knows? But yeah, I let me think. I know one of Kelsey's uncles and like an aunt and uncle are in a millennial choir. But I think they actually live down in Utah. I don't think we have any branches of the millennial choir up here.
I think
So,
I think there is one actually in Boise over
oh,
there, but maybe there's nothing. Which is funny.
maybe.
Why, like, I mean, there's members there, but
I
not.
wasn't even aware of it until, like, Kelsey's parents were like, "Hey, we should tune in and watch this millennial choir concert performance." It's not even a concert; it's like a highly edited video experience, but it's good. Like, they sounded awesome,
Put
and
that
they,
on the DVD.
yeah. Oh
A
yeah.
highly
So,
edited video experience.
but I'm sorry, I did not mean to say that in a way that was disparaging. It's cool. Like, they sound great, and they choose these really cool settings to film their performances. And I was like, just impressed with the whole thing. But I wasn't even aware of it until I married into a family where one of
Yeah.
the uncles was a part of it. So no, I am not part of a millennial choir. I am the choir is called the Idaho Chorale, Eastern Idaho Chorale. So that's and it's a community choir. We do sing some kind of religious songs, but there's also, like, we're singing songs that are based off of the poetry of Yeats and a couple others, and it's
And
great. I like it.
also some Disney hits, right? I'm really hoping you're singing In
Mm,
Summer from Frozen. I think
in summer,
that would
yeah.
be a nice addition.
I
Yeah.
have the solo one.
You get the still out there? You just Josh Gad it up.
Yes.
Josh Gad's best role though is Bear Claw on New Girl by far.
Oh, I never got
Deep
into
cut,
New
folks.
Girl. Sorry.
It's a bit of diminishing returns, but the first couple of seasons are pretty darn funny.
Mm-hmm.
You should go for it. So what is it? 2023? Is that what year we're in right now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the year when things finally turn around.
Dude, the weirdest thing, man. I mean, it's January now. We're going to be on the third anniversary of stuff shutting down because of COVID. And of course, longtime listeners know you and I have blown a lot of hot air about COVID over the past couple of years, a whole lot. That's just crazy. I don't know. It's not that I think thankfully overall it's a better situation, at least for a lot of us in certain Western communities. I mean, China is getting its butt kicked right now since the government just out of nowhere is like, yeah, we're done with the whole no COVID thing. They laid. I listened to a fascinating foreign policy podcast this week on China, just doing a random about face and just stopping. They don't call it no COVID. What was the Chinese term for it? I'm blanking on it right now.
Was
But
it
China has
zero COVID
zero
or
COVID. They had a policy of
yeah?
just like, I mean, people in China were swabbing their noses like every day,
Oh
and then
yeah,
one day the government just said, "That's it. No more. Don't worry
no,
about it." And now like everyone's infected. It's crazy. Which is
I
what
had
happened.
a I have a friend who was in Beijing with state, in foreign service,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
his take on it was he thought the whole zero COVID thing was like it was he to him, and I don't want to totally misconstrue what he said, but he said it felt less about actually contributing to public health and more about just exercising the full weight of their state power.
Yes.
And it was
Most
anyway.
initiatives are about government control in any country. So
I don't I
that's
don't know
fair.
about that,
No, I
but
think that makes sense. It's
uh,
true.
but he said, because he said it would just be like the smallest thing, like it's like, remember in DC when they'd predict 3 inches of snow and they'd just be like, shut it down, shut down the government.
This is
That
the worst.
he said that's what that it was kind of like, where it was like there'd be like one confirmed case and they'd be like, shut it down,
Yeah.
everyone's on lockdown, and he's like this isn't helping anyone.
For for an area, I mean, that like gets snow. Like this isn't Minnesota, but like we get snow. It's funny how much we're like never prepared when there's actually snow here.
Well,
Well, this isn't Atlanta. Atlanta just loses its mind when it snows there.
well, that
But
makes
this is
sense.
yeah.
Yeah, but I was talking with somebody about this today actually, and I was like, well, you see, the metro, they do have de-icing cars that can clear snow off the tracks, and he's like, that's good. And I said, unfortunately, they don't work if there's more than 6 inches of snow to clear. And he's like, oh, that makes no sense. Like, correct, that makes no sense. So, but if your system is limited to being able to let people get home safely, uh, up to 6 inches of snow, it kind of makes sense that you just shut things down
Yeah.
when there's a threat of more than that. So
I mean, on one upside though, I did some study and counties in the DC area have the highest rates of people still teleworking like in the country, which makes sense. I mean,
yeah.
government of all things has been kind of like, yeah, all right, we can do this now.
Well,
And
I'm a government
yeah.
contractor and I'm working from Idaho Falls. So
Yeah. Did you guys actually move before COVID? Like when
No,
you
we
first
moved
when
during
you
COVID.
moved during even your
Yeah.
first move there, right? Yeah.
Yep. Every time we stopped at a gas station, I masked up, and we had lots of hand sanitizer in the car. And it was funny. The farther west we got, the fewer masks I saw in those gas stations. Wyoming, there was zero masks.
Cheyenne, baby. Woo!
Yeah.
Anywho, you folks are tuning in to hear about Latter-day Saint news, of which
Oh, is
there
that what we
is
do? I forgot about that.
there's officially some this week. Yes, indeed, or redo. Some classic mentions for all y'all. Some things that might be more entertaining. I don't know if this will wind up being the usual Jared and I can't stop talking for an hour and a half, or if we'll be done in 15 minutes. I have no idea how this is going to go.
Well, we're already, I don't know how far in.
10 minutes in right now, my friend.
Oh, that's not too bad.
No,
We've bantered for longer than
oh,
that.
we've done far worse than that. So I'm just going to jump into my lead story. Everybody, Puerto Rico now has
That lovely island.
a dedicated temple. Elder D. Todd Christofferson went out there and dedicated it. We know, of course, President Nelson likes to send different apostles out to spread the wealth and spread the love for temple dedications. We've talked about that before. I think it's basically a policy of his, which is great. I think his predecessors weren't as into that. You've had a lot of President Monson sending out the first presidency to do everything, et cetera, et cetera. So this is cool. Puerto Rico got its temple, smaller one. It looks almost exactly like the temples in Guam or Cape Verde and stuff. But
Where in Puerto Rico is it? Oh, it's San Juan. Okay.
yeah, it's San Juan. I mean, I'm sure it's in a suburb of San Juan. I don't know exactly where it
It's
is.
still, I mean, I just didn't know if it was out in a more rural. Because is this Puerto Rico's first temple?
Yeah, it's the first temple in Puerto Rico, and it's a big deal.
Interesting. I don't know why I thought they had one. Okay.
I know it's kind of funny, right? Like they have stakes there. It's just taken a while. Well, the Caribbean's an interesting place because for a long time, you had the temple in the Dominican Republic in Santo Domingo, which was there for quite a while. I think since like the late '90s. I want to say it went in. Incidentally, one of the few temples newer temples too, it has an assembly hall upstairs. Very few temples do that anymore, but that one has one, which is kind of cool. But that was the only temple in the whole Caribbean for a long time. DR's got a lot of people. I mean, Haiti eventually got a temple, which is great. Now Puerto Rico has one. Jamaica still does not have one. Cuba is Cuba. And after that, you're dealing with much lesser Antilles. I don't know if we're ever going to see a temple in like Grenada or
That would be
Barbados.
cool.
That'd be cool. I'm for it. I'm pro. But I don't know. Or Netherlands Antilles somewhere. Like I don't know. But
Saint Lucia, the Saint Lucia Temple, right? That's what I'm holding out for.
yeah, that'd be cool. But I remember how big of a deal this was because remember it was 5 years ago, 5.5 almost, when Hurricane Maria just thrashed Puerto Rico, and they were still recovering when about a year later President Nelson announced the temple there in the country, which is a nice boon for the Saints. I mean, they've suffered a lot in Puerto Rico. It might be like U.S. soil, a U.S. territory. Their relationship with the U.S. is different, being
They
what they are.
even though they cannot vote in federal elections, they are citizens of the United States of America. So
Yes, and they are, of course. But the upside is, I believe they don't pay income tax. So federal tax, because representation, that whole deal. Anywho, they dedicated the temple there. Puerto Rico, yay, smaller, good for them. Let's hope they get another one someday. I've never been to Puerto Rico.
DC doesn't have representation either, and they pay federal tax.
I don't know what's going on. DC also gets electoral college votes though, and that's an amendment to the Constitution that enabled that. Right. They didn't have that until the 70s.
Does Puerto Rico have a non-voting member of the House like DC does?
I would assume so. I don't know who it is, but I would assume so. Yeah. Because
there's also Guam and American Samoa,
and U.S. Virgin Islands has a rep up there too. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So do you think they have like a little lunch club where they like commiserate with each other?
It's just the non-voting reps all hang out together. Yeah. So like, I didn't get to vote for McCarthy, man. During that fun little week, they just were they present for that? Was Eleanor Holmes Norton there, just hanging out, watching the fun unfold?
From what I know of her, I don't think she would have been voting for McCarthy.
No, probably not. I'd actually be surprised if maybe Samoa and Guam, Puerto Rico.
You probably have a more conservative base there.
Yeah, and for those of you new to U.S. politics, there's Puerto Rico becoming a state has been an ongoing. There's always been 3 questions about Puerto Rico. Is it either statehood? Does it sort of retain its Commonwealth status, or does it become just an independent country? Maybe an independent country in free association with the U.S., which would mean a kind of thing like they're independent, but we handle their military protection, stuff like that.
Right.
These have been questions for a long time.
Well, it's interesting because the questions happen in 2 forms, because there's the whole U.S. Political debate about it, and of course, Democrats are very much for, Puerto Rican statehood, and by and large, conservatives are very much against it. But then you go to Puerto Rico, and they have their own like very separate opinions and debates,
Yeah.
and they've had
Yeah.
referendums on it many times, and it's almost always split like down the middle.
Yeah.
But it always fails. It's always like, no, we don't want to be a state, but it's always like a really close
It's a lot
margin.
of,
So it's complicated. It's a really
well,
complex
it's very
issue.
complicated. But one of the biggest issues is even if Puerto Rico was like, if they were having referenda over and over and like 90% of the people were voting for statehood,
Mhm.
it would probably still never go anywhere because it has to go through the
No,
Senate.
exactly.
And on this side, the issue, of course, is if you give like DC statehood, that's a guaranteed 2 Democratic senators. Puerto Rico would probably also be 2 Democratic senators. And that's just never going to go anywhere politically because all of a sudden, like, I mean, the Democrats would be fine with it, but the Republicans are like, why would we want 4
Right.
seats?
This is
It's
why
gonna
it's
go
largely a
away.
partisan issue, because
Yeah, it's a hugely partisan
it's
issue.
about the balance of power. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if anything, I mean, the only way to do things like that, and they've often balanced out statehood admissions to the union for different reasons in history, for sure. I mean, I don't think like Arizona and New Mexico came in at the same time because they're like, well, Arizona is going to be red and New Mexico will obviously be blue because that wasn't the case at the time. But of course, you go in
Right.
our history. I mean, you got, Missouri Compromise, all kinds of fun things like that.
Sure.
This is all fresh in my mind. I've been reading a biography of James Buchanan, widely regarded as the worst president in U.S. history.
Interesting. I was going to say, like, why are you reading
That's
the
what
biography of James Buchanan?
I take my kids to the library a lot, and I've made sort of a loose goal of like, if I just like see stuff on an end cap, I'm just going to like go for it. I'm not going to take time to look it up on Goodreads. I'm just going to say, I'm going to go for this book.
Interesting. Wait, so is this like I mean, is it on an end cap because like John Meekum wrote it, or like why is this a prominent historian who
I
published
don't know. I
James
think the
Buchanan?
library just kind of puts stuff where they put stuff. It's called Worst President Ever. It's written in a very
That's really funny.
playful manner. I don't think it's the most thorough biography. It's a little bit breezy with the way it approaches things, but it's been fascinating to learn about that period of history, the pre-Civil War era, when you had a bunch of one-term presidents, and
Well,
you
and
had
executive power wasn't anything like it is today, and so like it was sort of like the era of weak presidents anyway.
a
So
little bit, yeah. And it's fascinating, frankly, to just see how things went back then when you had like the rise and fall of the Whigs, then the Republicans finally show up, the Democratic Republicans are shifting all over the place. Interesting time period, and Buchanan is widely known for not preventing the Civil War, presided over the Dred Scott decision, a panic of 57 as well. A lot of fun things happened under his watch. So it's been fun. He just like seemed like a president who didn't want to like offend anybody. So he just kind of sat there and like twiddled his thumbs. Anyway, we were talking
cool.
about Puerto Rico.
Yeah, we got
Yay.
a little off track, but
Puerto
that's
Rico.
fine. Well, other I guess I think it should be kind of a top story, at least just to pay tribute. But Mary Hales passed away this last week. It was,
Who is, and who, I mean, like,
yeah.
I
So
said,
I
I don't
actually
know
asked
who
this
that is.
question when I saw the headline. I was like, "Who?" And then, of course, it's the wife of the late Robert D. Hales, who was an apostle, a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles.
Yeah.
So he passed away. When was that? In 2017. So it's been
Has it been that long? 5 years already?
a
Jeez.
little over 5 years.
I remember that was
that he's been gone.
remember it was during conference. It was
Yeah, it was
during, it
October.
was
Yeah.
between sessions, and President Nelson came back and said Elder Hales had passed away,
Yeah,
which
I
is,
forgot about that. It was shocking. Yeah, a little
yeah.
shocking. I mean, he wasn't there. We knew he wasn't doing well. He hadn't been doing well
When
for
one passes
years.
away, they're usually not there. Yeah, that's.
I remember my mission president. He knew Robert D. Hales, and this is like what 1999, and I'm talking with him, and he made some comment about how he's like, I don't, we just don't think he'll be around for too long. He's got a lot of heart and health problems, and that was like 99 or 2000, and he lasts another 17 years. But yeah, so his wife, she was 90. She had made it to the ripe age of 90, and she passed away on the 15th, it says. So yeah, just almost a week ago.
Yeah.
But and it doesn't really go into like cause of death. So I'm just
It's just that
guessing
it
it
was
was
age.
incidental to old age. Yeah. But the church newsroom, that's what we're calling it, right? I always say this.
Well, this is the church news.
This is an article in the
news.
church news. They have a
The
very
church news.
nice little article that's basically a life sketch obituary type thing, paying tribute to a good lady who was married to a good man and had a good impact on us in the church. So it's worth taking a look at the church news and just getting a good glimpse of her life. It's funny because we don't really, because of the way just church leadership works, the only time we really think about the spouses of apostles and members of the first presidency are when they mention them in their talks, or when they pass away, so,
I
which is
feel
kind of
like
sad.
I feel like they are very deliberately trying to change that, though. I mean, now you see so many of these firesides or social media posts are
Well,
showing the two of them together. They're always showing them like, "Come,
yeah,
come, come, see Elder and Sister Renlund." Like they're presenting them as a
yeah,
duo
yeah,
once
exactly. A
working for
lot of
somebody
the
now.
youth and young adult and single adult firesides will, feature a husband and wife team. And this is before he was an apostle, but I was going to say a famous exception to this is Jeffrey R. Holland. When he was president of BYU, he would do side by side talks with his wife from
Yeah,
time to time, where they would share the podium and speak at the same time. And so, he was not one to kind of to take upstage his wife. But then, as an apostle, again, then it kind of becomes more like, oh, we don't really know much about her. But yeah, like you said, we see a little bit more of that with on the fireside type thing. But I don't know.
I think in general they've tried to like elevate them from a PR standpoint a lot
Right.
more,
Anyway, but
and sometimes it depends on just like the kind of profile one of the wives wants. I mean, like Marjorie Pay Hinckley
oh yeah, we knew her
we
a
knew her
lot.
very, very well. And
Yeah.
that's like compare that to say I'd
She also
say
published a really very popular book that
yeah.
was well received, and so yeah,
And
she
like
was a
and I
little
feel like
more public.
President Nelson's wife definitely in the mix, but like President Monson's wife had health challenges too. But in general, I think she was just the type not to
Right.
be as in the mix like
But
that. So
we felt like we knew Frances because President Monson told stories about
yeah.
her all the time. So
Incidentally, one thing I like at the end of this article, I have to imagine this came from the Hales family, but they actually published the Zoom link if you wanted to watch the funeral, which was today when we were recording. So it's too late, folks. You won't see it. But just not the kind of thing you expect you're going to get in a church news article that goes out over on a website this large. Like, hey, here's the Zoom link if you just want to, watch the funeral of
which is
a
still so
former
interesting to me.
apostle's
Like
wife.
that still feels new. Going back to COVID stuff, I attended my first Zoom funeral during COVID. One of my cousins passed away from cancer, and it was
Mm.
just really surreal to like be there in this family gathering. But then it was also weird because like I saw one of my mom's cousins like eating lunch during the funeral. Like I was like, why wouldn't you just turn your camera off for that? And so at the I was feel at the it was just weird simultaneous feelings where I was like, I'm so grateful that I get to participate in this funeral, even though it's I'm remote and there's this thing going on, and there's like and we see the further casualization of ceremony in America, where I
Yeah.
watched my mom's cousin shove pasta into her face during a very sad funeral. So
Oh boy, I like that you say kind of the normalization of casualness, but I am thankful that the pandemic has made letting people participate remotely much more of a norm. I mean, 3 years
yeah,
ago, if you'd have been like, hey, Bishop, I've got this software here and I want to like live stream my kid's baptism to some family members who can't be here. And they would probably be like, no, that's not appropriate. You can't do that.
right.
Like,
And now it's
it's,
in the manual that it's entirely
and now
appropriate.
it's totally fine, which is great.
Yeah,
Like I love that. I mean, I've presided over, since my time in the bishopric, I've presided over like child of record baptisms and things like that. And it's like it's a funny little wrinkle. Like you'll have people giving talks though who are on the Zoom call remotely. Like you
yeah,
pass it over to somebody on screen. I see somebody with their iPad who's doing the live stream, like they're just like walking um with their tripod, like over to the baptismal font, doing the whole thing. I think that's great. Like that's great. Like that
that's
we've
fantastic.
opened up about that. That's terrific. We should do more of that. Absolutely. But speaking of kind of being sticklers for the rules, I suppose. Sam Brunson over at By Common Consent, interesting article. It's called Say It Again, Sam, a plea to bishops. Long and short of it here, we're talking about the sacrament prayers and essentially the fact that I'm sure you've all been there in some meeting when the sacrament prayer is one of our few liturgical prayers, we could say, which is a prayer that we actually state, verbatim every time. It has a specific way it's supposed to be done. We have very few of those in our faith, really. I mean,
Right,
you got that, you got the baptismal prayer,
right.
and
And the thing the uniting feature of those is that they're
yeah,
part of ordinances, and we believe
yes,
that the ordinances have set
yeah.
words that were revealed by given by revelation.
Yeah.
So
And some of
that,
the things in the temple, of course, are, very word for word and those don't change. And that's also because, when you're doing proxy work, to want to present the exact same thing to the ones who are receiving the ordinance. Um, but this article goes a bit more into kind of some of the history of that. Cause we've all been there when like a priest kind of says it a little bit wrong. It's usually just a random little slip somewhere here or there. And, looks over at the bishop, see if the bishop, however, does it a thumbs up, a nod to the head, but sometimes they shake their head. And then
or
they go,
do a
then they,
little They do the little
Yeah.
do
Then
it
they kneel
again.
down
Yeah.
and they do it again. I've been in some meetings when it's like you do a many rounds, and it gets to that point when you do a lot of rounds. That's when I feel like you start to feel a little tense as a congregation. Like, are we going to get through this? Because you feel bad for the kid.
Yeah. Have
Who's
you ever seen the bishop kind of do this little like across the throat? Like,
no.
I'm just kidding.
It'd be better if he did it all like kill you. Um, but Sam gets into kind of the detail about this and sort of how the handbooks have even evolved a little bit over time and how they say to deal with that. Like it said in 1985, the sacrament prayers were revealed by the Lord, and the bishop should make sure they are spoken accurately. When the bishop corrects an error, he should be careful to avoid causing embarrassment or distracting from the sacredness of the ordinance. That's good. They updated it in 1989 to say the sacrament prayers were revealed by the Lord, and the bishop should make sure they are given accurately. It used to say spoken. Now it says given accurately.
Well, it
Then
makes
if
sense because you can sign there's an
yeah,
ASL, an approved ASL prayer. So
exactly. And if the person blessing the sacrament makes an error in the wording but corrects himself, no further correction is required. However, if he does not correct an error, the bishop should ask him to correct it. In doing so, the bishop then should be careful to avoid causing embarrassment, yada yada yada. So the main caveat there is I think before in 85, the idea was if they messed up, you'd start the whole thing over. And that was
right,
it. And now they're saying like if you miss a word, back up, say it correctly again, you can go forward. And that's kind of how it's been
right,
for most of my life because
right.
I grew up in that environment. But now the handbook, the currently updated one that's open to everybody, says the bishop makes sure the sacramental prayers are spoken correctly, accurately, and with dignity. If someone makes an error in the wording and corrects himself, no further correction is needed. If the bishop does not correct his error, the bishop kindly asks him to repeat the prayer. The bishop uses discretion when asking for the prayer to be repeated. He ensures that doing so does not cause undue embarrassment or detract from the ordinance. Another person at the sacrament table can help as needed. So, like, I look through the handbook frequently, but like this was totally lost on me. I did not notice this change at all. And what this is essentially saying is that the bishop can really decide if even if someone messes up the sacramental prayer, if it needs to be stated again, kind of knowing the vibe for the room, knowing the priest involved, is it something you should even do? And the bishop has the authority to just give the thumbs up and be like, we're good. The Lord knows what we're trying to do here, and we're cool with it. And I think that's great. I mean, I think we've seen the bishop's discretion become a much more prominent option in a lot of the handbook updates.
Mm-hmm.
And this is cool. And it's also worth noting, of course, we don't have anywhere that says in the scriptures that state the sacrament prayer needs to be done over and over again if it's done incorrectly. Like that's
No.
church policy and things that have evolved, but nowhere does it say that. It says give the sacramental prayer correctly, but not just keep going and just repeat it forever until you get it correct.
Well, and really, we're not even. I mean, at least with the second prayer, we're not using the one that was revealed. Either the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants both say wine, and we have changed it to water. And
Sure.
I know that's like a different, separate issue, but I think it still is relevant because it's we adapt, right? I think the whole point of the whole changing out the word wine for water is a sign of adaptation, and I think that we can extend that like a compassionate adaptation to
Yeah.
a 16-year-old who's doing his best. And especially I've been in multiple wards where there was a priest who had some special needs, and
Yeah.
was doing
Yeah.
his very best based on his limitations to give these prayers well. But and thankfully usually those bishops were very understanding and, like I said, compassionate, and didn't make them do things over and over again. But I have seen kids, special needs or not, asked to repeat it, and it's almost like it just makes it worse. Like if you say do this again, for some of them it means, oh, he's going to mess up again and it's going to be worse, and then, like I said, it can become a very tense downward cycle. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of room for compassion. There's a lot of room for the adaptation of just recognizing the fallibility of anyone who's trying to perform work on behalf of the Lord. And we saw this I think it was just this last Sunday. That one of the priests was given a prayer, and I think he added in an "and" in the second prayer, which is very easy to do because it's more abbreviated, so it kind of
Mhm.
feels like it's missing words maybe. And I just turned to and then they started passing the water, and I turned to Kelsey. I was like, "Did he add in an and?" And Kelsey was like, "Yeah." But the bishop, I doubt he didn't catch it. I think he just made a use discretion. Is that what the word was in the?
Yeah.
Yeah, he used his own discretion to say, like, it's okay. We don't need to redo this. The prayer was given well enough that the Lord is going to accept this ordinance, and it's not going to affect any of our abilities to renew our covenants or reflect upon the sacrifice of the Lord Jesus Christ. So, yeah,
Hey,
I think
hey,
I like this. I think
it's a good
Sam.
approach.
I usually feel like Sam makes good points, but I really liked this one. I think he's brought up some really good things for us to think about and for leaders to think about.
Do you want to get into a really pedantic digression?
I do. You know me. I'm Mr. Pedantry.
Okay. So I remember I wrote this article over at This Week in Mormons a few years ago called "The Sacrament Prayers Are Grammatically Wrong."
Oh yeah, I remember. No, I think I actually we were on. I was on the episode when we talked about
Did we
that.
talk about this one? Anyways,
Yeah,
I happened to stumble. I was thinking about it, so I stumbled upon it. I
because you wanted it to be that, or wait, you wanted to
It's a
switch to
that
that for a witch.
it's a
Yeah,
that which issue because it says
yeah.
and keep his commandments which he the prayer say keep his commandments which he has given them, right?
Which is a restrictive clause or whatever.
It should be grammatically it should be and keep his commandments that he has given them, or you would say keep his
Comma.
commandments, comma, which he has given them. And in that case,
Yeah,
when you do comma which, it means essentially the extra verbiage words after the comma is just adding more color, but it's not adding new information to the
yeah.
sentence. Whereas if you say that he has given them, it's a very clear extra bit of
Well, if you
information.
leave out the comma and you say the commandments which he has given them, it's indicating, well, there may be other commandments which he
Commandments
has not given.
not
So
given.
who
Yes.
else is a source of commandments, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that like let's take that one up with Moroni,
Yeah,
huh?
well, yeah. If we're going to adapt, like, let's just let anybody, given the prayer, priest or otherwise, just take a red pencil to the sacrament prayer and give it in the way that they feel most
Yes, sure.
in current modern English reflects what we're trying to communicate.
In fairness, though, like we've updated the Book of Mormon to fix grammatical errors.
That's true.
Why do we
So
not update the sacrament prayers?
with a comma.
Either with a comma or with a that. One or the
Because
other.
we would need that to be a revelatory comma. You can't just add in commas willy nilly. You have to bring it to the source of revelation.
I know Kurt doesn't name the episodes anymore, but if you could call this just call the episode revelatory comma, I would appreciate it. I think that would do well. They don't do it. I don't even know what number episode this is anymore. I assume it's like 745. I don't even know. It's
I would totally. I mean, I am an editor, but I would totally listen to a podcast about editing called the revelatory comma. This is higher than the Oxford comma, Geoff.
Oh, I
Yeah.
was actually I was interviewing someone for a position this week, and when I interview communications people, people who I want to be content generators, I sometimes like to just like for fun, loosen up a bit. Like they'll ask them like, "What's your preferred like writing style?" Like justify AP to me versus Chicago or something like that.
Right.
But I said like, "All right, this is really cool. We're at the end of the interview, and I'm going to ask you a question, and this is like important. Like you take the time to answer it correctly." And I said, "Oxford comma, yay or nay, and why?" And she lit up and explained to me why the Oxford comma was so important. It is so important, people. I love the AP, but AP style is very dumb when it comes to lists. The Oxford comma is crucial. It's crucial, people. Everyone
I
should have the Oxford comma.
I mean, it lends clarity, and there are times where it doesn't lend more clarity. Like I know our good friend, our mutual friend Joseph, thinks that it should be flexible. That because the one rule is you have to be consistent in your usage. Either do use it or don't.
True.
And Joseph argues for use it when you need it for clarification and leave it out when you don't. And I think that's just chaos. I think that's what
No,
brings about the end of the world.
Joe, you're wrong. You've got to use the Oxford comma. And if you're doing lists that involve sublists where one of those items is broken up by commas, you got to do semicolons for your list, my friends.
Oh yeah.
No. Oh yeah.
Again, Geoff, I am an editor. Like I see
There's
this
no way around this.
all the time. I'm like, or I'll see people who use semicolons just because it's a really long list. And I usually, first of all,
well, that's not fair.
I know
you can't just do it for fun.
I know. It's just like I think there's this part of them that goes, "Oh, I know that there's certain rules about complicated lists where you have to use a semicolon." So generally what I do is not only do I delete the semicolons, but I make it into a bulleted list. Because if you have like more than like 4 or 5 things, it's like no one wants to read that sentence.
That's true.
Anyway, we digress. But
this is more fun though than Latter-day Saint news. Let's just talk about grammar.
The revelatory comma.
This is the talk editing.
We are no longer This Week in Mormons. Welcome to the revelatory comma with Geoff and Jared.
This week in grammatic pedantry. which
But
I can't like. I enjoy it. Jared is at a way higher level than I am in terms of editing.
well, again,
I'm
it's
not
my
going to front.
job. It's my
Still,
job. So, and I will say I'm good at it. I'm good at two things. I'm good at knowing the nitpicky rules of American grammar and punctuation, and I'm also good at really weird formatting in Word. I'm the guy on my like I'm part of a documentation team,
yeah.
and everyone's pretty good. I mean, most like a lot of the other people aren't technically editors; they are more like they're the technical writing side of things. But still, and everyone, we all use Word as our main software.
Mhm.
But if there's ever an issue, I'm the guy. I'm the guy they come to. They're like, I can't figure out how to fix this formatting, and I don't know. I
I
just, it's a stupid program. I feel the same way about Word as I did about the HVAC. May it rest in peace. I know it hasn't been torn down yet,
oh yeah
but I love that building partly because it's a monstrosity. Like it just has so much wonderful character, and I feel similarly about Word. I don't love it, but there's a part of me that just feels endeared to it because of the struggles I've had to go through with it.
yeah.
We've formed a bond. So I'm good at figuring out what's going on with Word
Yeah,
and
it's
why.
like me. It's like me with my fellow counselors in the bishopric. Makes yeah, yeah, same feeling.
Oh goodness!
Hey,
Wow, it's a new
well,
can of worms.
I mean, what I mean, never mind.
Well, never mind. Well, let's move on then. Speaking of pedantry, let's continue to be pedantic. And so, times and seasons, which is another. I feel like at least during the era of Jeff Openshaw, especially if Sam Brunson wrote an article for By Common Consent, it by common consent got a lot of airtime on this show. Times
Yeah,
and seasons, not as much, and I'm not sure why.
here and there.
But I mean, it's the same thing in my personal life. I very frequently will read or at least peruse a by common consent article. Not as much with Times and Seasons. I'm not sure why, but they posted something earlier this week where they got into it with whether or not Latter Day Saints should be watching R-rated movies, and they even make a case for there being very worthy and very, I mean, I don't know if worthy is the right word, but just very commendable R-rated material out there that members of the church should be watching. And I don't know. What do you think about this, Jeff? What say ye on the pedantic no R-rated movies rule? I guess, kind of revealed my hand here by calling it pedantic. But yes, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I'm curious about. I need to parse the name of the article is called "R-rated Sound of Musics." Is he trying to say like ones that should be universally accepted within our faith community? Like The Sound of Music's a beloved film. I feel like it's never explained. If you do a quick sound of page search, it's the headline and then the last paragraph, which is a list of R-rated analogs to The Sound of Music. These are R-rated films and series that, in my opinion, are some of the most impactful gems that a member could miss if they hold hard and fast to the R rule. So I guess it's
I
okay.
guess I'm just saying, like, just like like the Sound of Music is full of good and uplifting and thought-provoking content, and it's become ubiquitous in the LDS home. These are analogous in that
I guess
there's,
we never watch it because The Sound of Music I do love as a film
Mhm.
for what it is, just a massive dose of sugar, and that's fine. But my wife can't watch it because when Maria and the captain finally get together in the gazebo, they've
Mhm.
got the soft lighting,
And they
and the
mash their
captain
faces together.
and the captain random like starts saying, he's like, "Do you know when I knew I loved you?" And he's like, "It's when you sat on that stupid pine cone." Like her first night with the kids, and they put a
Uh-huh.
pine cone in her chair. And my wife sits there, she's like, "Hold on. You're telling me you'd barely seen this woman and she sits down on a pine cone that your stupid kids placed there. And that's the moment you're like, that's it. She's the one. She's
Well,
the
and then
one
he
for me.
continues to treat her kind of
Sorry, Baroness. It doesn't matter anymore."
and then he continues to treat her very coldly. I mean, he knows he loves her when she sits on this pine cone, and then he like treats her like a
He doesn't know.
a
He knows
dispensable servant.
he knows she loves her when he hears the kids singing music in the other room and it softens his heart and he sings along. That's fair. But the
Yeah.
pine cone, no, 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 no. Anyway,
No.
um,
Anyway,
anyway,
that's
so
really
as far as
funny.
the R-rated thing, I think I held fast to it through my adolescence, and I think
Mhm.
back then even the church was a little bit more explicitly using R rating as the guidance.
And I don't think it was ever in the
Wasn't it in For Strength of Youth though? Didn't it say that?
I don't think it said R rated. At least in, yeah, I don't think so during our era of For Strength of Youth. but I do remember it being mentioned in at least one conference talk. Like they used the term R-rated movies.
Yeah, I'm trying to do a quick query of LDS.org, or sorry, churchofjesuschrist.org, to see if it'll. I mean, okay. So the New Era in 2001 has an article where it says straight up, a prophet of God has said not to watch R-rated movies.
Oh, who do they cite? Which prophet of God?
I'm getting there on.
It must have been as Jeff Benson. I don't think anyone has said it since him.
Be grateful. R-rate. R means don't rationalize. Elder Creel Cofford of the 70. What difference
Yeah,
does it make? Why
that's
does
not
rated
a
R?
prophet. That's a 70.
Let me see if there's other ones here. Now, in fairness, so like here's the thing. So this is a whole article about like the stuff to consume, right? And like there's some fair like we must not feed ourselves diets of trash. Um, don't let the wrong kinds of books, pictures, and other reading material be near you to tempt you to make even, having the slightest glance. It is very unreasonable to suppose that exposure to profanity, nudity, sex, and violence has no negative effects on us. Anyway, so they've said R-rated, yada yada yada, and I remember this showing up, but the church doesn't say that anymore. And I think the main reason it doesn't say that anymore is not because they're saying watch whatever you want. There's an element to that, though. I mean, we think about the New for the Strength of Youth, which is much more principles based and like make good decisions for yourself and figure that out, less prescriptive. But I think it's also just because we're a global church and we were basing our morality in the arbitrary rating system of the trade association that represented the big five studios. Like
Sure.
that's where we were getting our like that this random group that rates the films, and we were saying like, yes, that is what it's based on. Of course it's arbitrary because if you go to a rating system in the UK, you could have two PG-13 films here in the US that are largely similar in content. I can't think of what it would be right now, but they could both be PG-13. And in Great Britain, one of them might be a 12A, one of them might be a 15.
Mm-hmm.
Two R-rated movies here, one of them might be a 15, one of them might be an 18 in the UK, because it's a different culture, different ratings. So you just can't base if it's a godly principle or set of principles, you can't base it on a worldly rating system. I mean, that's why I find using
Especially
things
since, like, even like going back to your comparative example with the UK, like with R ratings in America, like supposedly that means it's restricted for under age of 17. So even just like there's not a good analogy because in Britain it's 15A, and so it's like, well, is there a difference between a content that's been deemed appropriate for someone 17 and older in America versus someone 15 and
Yeah.
older in
Well, and don't
like,
even get me started on the weirdness of the fact that like NC-17 exists, and that means like no one under 17 can see this,
yeah,
which
because
is
R
weird.
you have to have you could
You can
see R
have
if you had an adult with you,
if you have
right?
an adult, but I think it's mostly because, and at least in the States, NC-17 is a weird rating because let's face it, America is a violent country. Like you can have torture porn, you can have tons of language, and it'll get rated R. But if it's got a little bit too much sexuality, they'll slap it with an NC-17, right?
Right.
And
Yeah, they invented the rating for like showgirls, right?
well, I think they invented the rating because rated X, which when the X rating was initially created, it did not have the pornography connotation. It kind of carried with it like, no, this is like just even more beyond R. This is now rated X. But then the porn industry kind of uh, took that over. They kind of co-opted it, and that's why they got rid of it. So it was a different way to say that because then it had this. They were trying to have a more legitimate rating that they could use for more intense content that would not sound like it was just pornography. But
Right.
still, you got showgirls, right? And so showgirls, sure, full of nudity, sexuality, all this stuff. Why is it okay for a 17-year-old then to go and see that alone?
Right.
But that same 17-year-old cannot go and buy a Playboy because you have to be 18 to do that legally.
Yeah. No,
That's
yeah.
another.
So it's just weird inconsistencies, right?
That part's weird too. So I think like when you're consuming media, I agree with the broader notion of like, yeah, don't feed yourself garbage. I mean, figure out what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
I like to use things like Common Sense Media or even just IMDb. Like if something interests
Sure.
me, maybe I'll go
Yeah, they
check
have
out.
like the parents guide, and they'll
Yeah,
tell
look at
you
the
what
parents
you
guide
can
and like tell
expect.
me
Yeah.
like, and I might say like, oh, I didn't realize this show is going to have like all this much kind of stuff in it. Maybe I'll pass.
You
If
know what
something has
else?
like a
Oh, good.
couple of F words in it, or I can speak all day about this. Like I think about the King's Speech and Social Network back in 2010. King's Speech won Best Picture, but you remember the big drama around it because it's essentially a PG movie with one scene where he's
Where
dropped.
and the reason why he's dropping a bunch of F-bombs is because it's part of his speech
Yes.
therapy.
And that, but they got, so I mean, it was such a big deal. They got a version released that either that just muted that sequence so that
Which
it could be PG
really, I
so
think,
kids can,
takes a lot of wind out of the sails of that movie.
so kids can
Honestly,
go
I
see
think
it.
it's a very powerful scene, and when you take the curse words out of it, you're like, oh, it's kind of
Yeah.
weird, you know.
It's weird, and then you compare that to something like The Social Network. It's a big competitor at the Oscars that year, and I actually still stand by. I think Social Network should have won Best Picture over The King's Speech,
Hmm.
but Social Network was PG-13. Social Network though has like way headier subject matter and mood. I mean, you have
True.
drugs and sexuality and
And Army Hammer was in it twice because he plays his own twin, and that guy.
like like
Just kidding.
like it's still like a PG-13 movie, but when you think about it, like the rating system is goofy in that sense,
Yeah,
and you can't trust in everything like that. I know we're drifting a bit because the point of this is to say
I want to.
here's a list of R-rated stuff that's worth
Yeah.
watching, and
Well, I want to drift just a little bit more because what's interesting. Well, first of all, I think there's a reason to drift because like I noticed on this list, there's a lot of media that is like television, and so like those even don't even have
well,
R
TV. He
ratings.
mentions TVMA, yeah. Like
Sure,
Better
but
Call Saul is on the
still,
list. I'm like, guys, Better Call Saul might get TVMA. Better Call Saul's fine. It's like it's not even as
and not every
anyway.
and you know well, and a TV show can vary episode to episode. I
Yeah,
think some
sure.
episodes of Better Call Saul were TVMA, but others were TV what a 14 or whatever the
This is an
next one down
interesting
is.
list though, because some of these I'm familiar with aspects of them, and I like Requiem for a Dream may be important, but I think it's a hard time to. I know what's in that
I
movie,
have no interest in watching
and I
that.
don't know if that that makes the cut for something
Right.
that's still worth your
Well,
time as a
and this
Latter
is
Day
what, well,
Saint.
this person also included Godfather 3 on their list. So, big grain of
A
salt.
Godfather 1 and 2 on there.
Yes, it's Godfather
Okay,
1 and 2, and then in parentheses, So Sue Me, in parentheses, 3. And so I was like, well, yes, and no. But anyway, I just another interesting kind of a little bit off track
The
thing.
Northman, wasn't that the one that just came out? There was
That's
like
the one like
crazy,
that
super violent Viking
super
stuff.
violent Viking
Why is
stuff.
that
Yeah.
on the list? That's just like a
I,
random action thing.
I, from all what I've heard, it's an excellent piece
No,
of
I'm sure it's
cinema.
good, but I mean, there's like
But I don't know if it's Sound of Music
I'm just
level.
trying to think about like what makes these things, like Shawshank Redemption. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, definitely be on there. Thin Red Line. Yeah, I think that could be
I never
part of
saw
it.
that one.
Eternal Sunshine is
I love
is
Eternal
great,
Sunshine. Yeah,
great
but
movie.
well, I just wanted to say when
Gary Glenn Ross. If you just want to watch people drop f bombs
I
for
was
like
gonna
all day,
say again, maybe I mean it's powerful writing and good acting, but like yeah, I mean it's so full of profanity
and
that it's like I
Magnolia
can see.
similarly. Yeah,
Yeah, but I thought one other interesting thing about this whole rating system thing that we've applied to movies and now television, as you pointed out, if you tried to create a rating system for books, I think there would be a huge uproar
mm,
because like there's something that we hold sacred about the printed word, and especially in America, where the First Amendment, the first of 10 amendments addresses freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and freedom of religion, all
yeah,
in one amendment. It's funny. There's a good argument for breaking for breaking those up into three amendments, but because of speech and press, if you tried to say this book is rated whatever because, and I mean, we're seeing that now with the whole book banning debates that are going on across
sure.
America with
And that's
school and public
yeah, and
libraries.
that's gonna and it's coming in waves for sure. I mean, like Catcher in the Rye
Sure.
was controversial
But
for a
even
time,
still,
right?
I think if there was some, whether it was a trade association or a government association that tried to put a rating on books, I think people would be outraged. And so it's interesting that, I mean, movies and television, while are not packaged in a paper or an electronic format with whatever as a book, they are the written word. They start as scripts,
Yeah,
and then we have no problem with saying, and now we're going to tell you how to consume or how you ought to think about consuming this written word.
and I like what you said there. How you ought to think about consuming it, because
Right. And
I
so,
think
and
you
again,
see
if
it
we tried to do
similarly.
that with books, people would be like, don't you, no, the written printed word is sacred. It was like, well, is not
At the same
anyway.
time, it's like, and I feel like I don't know every history of the rating system in the U.S. I have to imagine I don't think movies showed up with ratings until after like the Hays Code kind of disappeared, which was the
Yeah.
self-imposed like set of guidelines the industry followed for 30 odd years. That
Yeah. I don't think you start seeing ratings until the 60s, I want to
yeah,
say.
and it's kind of around then. At the same time, it like kind of lets you know what you're getting into. I think it's funny you say that about books, and I agree there would be an uproar. I also think about like you know um, Broadway plays, theater
Mhm.
essentially, which doesn't have a rating. At the same time, sometimes I've read books or I've been to the theater and I felt a little blindsided because I had no idea what some of the content would be that I did not
True.
necessarily want to have my.
No, and I don't, and I'm fine with content warnings. Like I do, I use IMDb as well to go in and see, look at the parent guide and just see,
But books don't have content warnings.
No, but you can read, people blog. There are, there are
Yeah.
ways to be able to shape your expectations
How
without a rating system, though,
how,
right?
how do you think books have avoided this up to this point? I remember growing up through like the parental advisory label on CDs, for example,
Mhm.
that really got a lot of that really started picking up in the 90s. I remember that. That was a way because parents were
Yeah,
freaking out that
sure,
like,
sure.
Cop Killer had come out from my screen,
NWA
all this
or
stuff. Yeah,
stuff like
whatever.
that. Yeah.
And so like that became a thing. The rating system for television didn't show up until like the mid late 90s when all this because before that
Hmm.
there was nothing that's showing TV PG 14 MA that just didn't exist at the time.
Right.
You had broadcast television and you had cable where they could do whatever they wanted. It's actually interesting to me that the publishing industry has just sort of just avoided it. It's the oldest one of all of them, of
And
course. So
again,
maybe that's why.
I
But
just think that, especially in America, you just get people up in arms about it. I think they avoid it because they know it wouldn't be received well. But going
I'm
back, I
sure
guess.
Matt Gates is going to find a way to bring this up.
Oh, please no.
I wouldn't agree.
Wait, you're suggesting? Oh, sorry, I'm going to get a little political here. Are you suggesting that he would do something to actively govern? I just
No,
can't. Okay,
no,
okay. So there you
no,
go.
no, no.
Okay,
Don't get me started on
going
this. There's
back.
all this debt ceiling stuff going on right now.
So
Let's
just
not
go.
even get like,
We need to move on from this,
yeah.
but I asked you think, and I'll just really quickly put my 2 cents in. I was raised in a very strict no R-rated movies home, and it's funny because I've seen my mom bend a little bit on that in her older age. Like there's certain movies that she loves, and I'm like, Mom, isn't that rated R? And she's like, Yeah, this one doesn't count.
It's like when we needled Evan McMullen when the first time he was on the show because his favorite movie was 3 Days of the Condor, and I was like, dude, that's rated R. How are you
I
going to get
know,
Mormons to
yeah.
trust you? But
But like, why?
have
I
you
mean,
seen
you
3
look
Days
at
of
it
the
and you're like,
Condor?
why is it rated R? Like,
There's not
it's so tame. It's so tame.
there's not much. There's a very awkward sex scene.
Yes, and
Very,
also,
but
I
it's
mean,
like a very,
there's some violent images, from the people who get killed.
but it's
But
not
like,
like that
no, it's not
bad.
disturbing.
Like the French
Uh,
Connection is harder than 3 Days of the
yeah,
Condor.
well, Friends Connection, not just for the actual language, but just because Popeye is like racist and
Oh yeah,
he's a dirty cop, and like so thematically, it's definitely heavier than. Anyway, I I remember though. I mean, I held to that for a long time, and then I remember thinking about it one day that I had loved and watched and rewatched several times because I have it on DVD. The HBO miniseries Band of Brothers,
mm, yeah,
and I remember at one point after having watched it thinking, man, if anything is rated R, this is. Even though it wasn't, it didn't have a rating. I think it probably did have a TV rating. I wasn't aware of it because they didn't put those on the DVD case because you didn't have to
yeah,
because you're not broadcasting it, right?
yeah.
And so I just remember thinking, well, if I'm cool with watching this, there's probably other media out there that's quote unquote rated R that's also worth my time and consideration. And I kind of just started doing the whole, well, I'll just, like you said, I'll check out IMDb. I'll
Look at
kind of
Satan just
I'll
working
see
hard
what
on
if
you,
if
man.
there's content that I'm worth, and so I remember, I think the first R-rated movie that I went and saw in the theater, I want to say was Silver Linings Playbook,
Oh wow,
which I loved. And I was just like, I'm really glad I watched this. I'm really glad I took the time and, made this part of my repertoire because I've still only seen it the one time, but I think about it all the time. And as I've seen people in my life go through mental health issues, as I've had my own like bouts with, minor mental health stuff, I think about that movie all the time and it made a real impact on me. And so I think there is an argument that, and it's a very good argument that we, like you said, we shouldn't allow some trade association to dictate what is worth and not worth our time and consideration, and that we can make our own informed decisions for what do I want to let into my life. And sometimes I think very justifiably those things are rated R or rated TVMA or TV
yeah,
whatever. But just, but that doesn't mean anything goes. Just, be choosy like you would be choosy with anything else. I've put books down that, that were not rated, but
sure.
like that I came across a scene and I was just like, I can't, no, I'm not going to keep reading this. Like, that's your prerogative and exercise it. But yeah, I don't think there's any justification anymore for saying like, well, the MPAA said that this might
Well,
harm you
no, it would be
spiritually.
the prophet said don't watch R-rated movies, but
but it's not
And
the
then
profit. It's the MPAA who's
I know.
ultimately like being that gatekeeper for you,
Yeah.
and you're like, well, the MPAA said this is going to harm me spiritually, so
Yeah. Well, and I think also on the other side of it is I think we have to be careful because we're kind of talking about like how you can find merit in what is genuinely adult content, quote unquote, but you can find merit in it. At the same time, you could also make the argument that it was easier to say R-rated years ago when nowadays it's gotten so murky because you'd be like, oh, there's a lot of like PG-13 stuff you probably shouldn't watch either.
sure. There's
Like,
there's
that gets even
PG-13s
harder.
that are probably worse than ours, but then on that argument, there's a lot of ours that are better than
Oh
PG-13s.
yeah.
So it's like, you can make the argument cuts both ways.
And it's always so hard. I remember what's that movie called? It's the one that's got it's like Diane Keaton, I think. Is it Steve Martin and Alec Baldwin are all in it? It's like a rom-com for older people. What was it called? Something's Gotta Give. I think that's
Oh,
what it's
okay,
called.
is that what it is?
Anyway, that movie is rated R instead of PG-13 only because there is a scene that shows them smoking marijuana without negative consequences. Like it doesn't negatively portray marijuana use, and so it got hit with an R rating. Like there's an
Mm.
example of the arbitrary nature of it. Now I'm not saying watch it. I'm not saying if you want your kids to think pot's good or like
Like
whatever. But
10 years ago, I saw somebody was proposing a rule because they were trying so hard to just like crack down on like just trying to get America to quit smoking. And there was somebody the MPA at one point was seriously considering a rule that if any smoking, any tobacco use was in a movie, they would automatically make it an R.
yeah.
And so again, so it's
Well,
like,
well, they have noted that now. If you look at the ratings of why, because a lot
yeah,
of stuff will
depictions
the
of
why it is,
smoking,
it'll say
yeah,
tobacco
or
depictions of smoking.
depictions of drug use. You see that
Yeah,
too. But like,
that'll be a thing.
yeah.
Well, anyway, Satan is alive and well with both of us. Just dragging us down. I don't understand
I love this echo chamber.
Why is Emily in Paris not on this list here? I mean, come on, Steven. Where's
Uh,
Emily in Paris?
I
Come
don't
on.
know enough about that show to know.
Where's
But
Bridgerton, man? Come on.
are both of those
I
steamy shows?
should I leave a comment that just says I humbly submit The Room? Why is that not on the list?
Is that the Tommy was so?
Yeah, why is that not on the list?
Oh, funny.
Oh boy. All right, a couple quick things here. So the Church News has published a nice little ditty here about membership numbers in Latin America. As a quick aside, I noticed looking at the attachment for this graph they put in there, the church uses Chorus. For the Church News uses the Chorus content management system, CMS, which is the one owned by Vox. Just a
Oh,
random thing.
interesting.
The church uses Chorus is a nice system, but and I know a couple years ago they opened it up to other people. But go figure, the church is using a Vox product, that leftist rag. So everybody,
Founded by that dirtbag Ezra Klein.
I guess he left though, right? Isn't he in the New York
No,
Times
yeah, he
now?
works with the New York Times now,
Yeah.
and he has a very enjoyable podcast. Sorry.
So members as of December, unrelated. If you ever listen to the daily podcast on New York Times, they just put one out this week about where they followed people migrating across the Darien Gap, which is
Hmm.
this jungle area between Panama and
Yeah.
Colombia. It's the only part where there's no road for the Pan American Highway. It's a depressing but very fascinating listen to. You're hearing about like Venezuelan people who are trying to walk all the way to like the United States and stuff like that.
It's crazy.
It was fascinating. And their reporter like went down there and just like decided to like migrate with other people and stuff. So anyway, Latin America members as of December 31st, 2021, mind you, because they're not going to give you the 2022 reveal. You got to wait till April conference for that, people. Don't think that they know, but they're not going to tell you yet. Come on, you got to wait. Either way, this shows sort of the percent increase over 10 years, which is kind of cool. In some of these countries. And so like hard numbers are one thing, but a percent increase says a lot. Haiti is number one in terms of percent increase over 10 years, a 43% gain in membership. There's only about 25,000 members in the country, but a 43% gain is huge with respect to their overall numbers.
Well, and
So
what is the overall population of Haiti? It's not that big, is
it's
it?
not crazy big. No, I mean, yeah, I wish they would show per capita on here. That'd be kind of interesting as well. The one that I
Oh,
did not,
okay. No, there's 11.5 million people in
okay.
Haiti, but still, like, yeah, 43% increase.
I did not
That's
expect to
that's
see
big.
though Belize on this list. You know, Belize kind of, you look at Central America. Belize is like the one Central American country now with no temple announced. Nicaragua was that for a long time until they got the one announced. Belize is just over there on the Yucatan Peninsula next to Mexico and Guatemala. They speak English there because it was a British colony until the 60s. You don't think much about it, but Belize, and there's only 5,500 members, but that's still a 37% increase over the past 10 years. Good for them.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. Chile, on the other hand, is bringing up the rear at number 24 with only a 6% growth rate over 10 years. Well, a 6% increase over 10 years, which is there's over 600,000 members in Chile, but apparently the work is not going at an expeditious pace.
So there's like, let's see, there's 19.5 million people in Haiti. And I remember at one point they were reporting that um, that like 1 in 5 people in Chile were like members of the church. And maybe that was exaggerated.
That was like famously why Elder Holland was sent to preside over the Chile area back like 20 years ago. Remember, like when he and Elder Oaks presided over Philippines and Chile respectively. Like the church put it out like it was this cool opportunity, but everyone kind of read it like, yeah, Chile's got a lot of members on the books, but it's not living up to its potential. So an apostle is coming down there
So if
to
you run the actual, like I just did a quick, if the number on that chart is correct and the current population is about 19.5 million, that you got 3% of the country
yeah, that's the
is,
same as the US,
yeah.
basically.
I mean, which is, not a
Good for
small
us.
number. Like it's not, as far as a religious minority goes, having 3% of the population be a member of your church, that's significant.
Oh,
But
but how I mean, how is it with Brazil then? We're probably about 3% in Brazil or
oh, you're
more,
making me
maybe.
do all the division
Yes,
here.
I
Okay.
am.
All right, let's see. Population of Brazil, I'm sure, is much
Brazil's about what,
higher.
200 something million?
Hang on. I'm just Googling here. I'm just pressing go.
214, baby.
214 million. So let's do the math here.
This is very important here.
So what do they say? Okay, I'm gonna
1
round
million.
up.
You could round up to 1.5 million if you
That's
want.
what I'm doing. And what did we say the total population was?
214 million. It's going to be better than 3.
No, I did that wrong. It's about 7%. Yeah. I just have a zero. I just had to move a decimal point over one. So yeah, about 7% of the population of Brazil
Not
is
bad,
on the
Brazil.
church records. Now, of course, when we kind of were talking about this a little bit about before the show, this does not reflect activity rates. So it's a lot harder for us to know
Oh, the
out of
church will never
this.
publish that.
No, and it's hard to gauge. I mean, they do gauge it. We take, and some wards do it better than others. So I wonder about how reliable the numbers are. But we take um, role in Sunday school and Elders Quorum and Relief Society and youth classes in primary. So we probably have some rough idea of what activity rates are, but still, it would be hard to really know out of the
Mm-hmm.
603,000 members in Chile, how many of them actively still would identify and acknowledge, yeah, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and how many of them are actually showing up and attending meetings. Who knows?
Permission
But
to pedant.
oh, please do.
I don't want us to cut off your thought though.
No. I was just thinking, like, with Mexico and Brazil and a couple of these other countries, we're seeing really big numbers. But, what does that mean as far as like people showing up and being active participants in this church? So I don't know.
Yeah, where did that go? So, as far as I'm aware, I believe this article is about, the church growth in Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly fair though, but if we're being real, Jamaica is not part of Latin America.
It is not. And again, is Belize part of Latin America?
Yeah.
Being an
No,
English speaking country?
is Guyana where they speak English? Is Suriname where they speak Dutch? Is French Guiana, which is part of metropolitan France, like it's like a state? It's like Hawaii for
I was
us.
gonna
Like,
say, what do they speak in French Guiana? Just kidding.
I wonder.
Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, is that Latin America?
They've got the Caribbean well
And here's
represented
a
in here,
question: why does Trinidad make the cut? Why is Jamaica on the list?
but
But
not
like,
not the
why isn't
Bahamas.
or why aren't like the random other Lesser Antilles, like Trinidad and Tobago, get on there? But why not other like the other parts of the Caribbean?
Wait, is Puerto Rico in here?
I don't think so. Yeah, it's down near the bottom,
Oh, there it
12%.
is. Okay, I was like gonna say. Okay,
I mean, like, where's the cutoff here? Like, why are they? I mean, like,
I
Trinidad and
want to
Tobago,
know.
they speak English there. Why isn't the Bahamas on this list?
I
You're
want to
covering everybody
know.
else.
Yeah, I want to know. The 10-year increase in growth in Aruba.
Do better, Church News.
Do better. Oh, you know what it is? It's because they used this Vox tool.
You think this is the fault of the chorus
I'm
CMS?
just kidding. I just want to blame that.
I blame Ezra Klein.
I blame Ezra Klein. That's
I
the
blame Ezra
title of the
Klein
episode.
and my holy comma, or whatever we called that earlier.
Ezra Klein and the revelatory comma.
Revelatory comma.
That's going to be my new action adventure novel that I write.
I like it. There you go.
All right. What did I? Oh, we can do this real quick. Artist
Yeah,
Partial. I've mentioned her a couple times. I think
she's
before
great.
on the show. She is I guess we could refer to her as a semi-professional historian. What she gets paid to do, as far as history is research. She's a very capable researcher, and people, she works freelance. But she also has kept a blog. I think she's restarted it. She dropped off of Twitter
Keep a
recently.
pitching in, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. She was on Twitter as Keep It Pitching In, but she had this blog, and it had fallen a little more to the wayside because a lot of what she posted just went straight to Twitter. And since she left Twitter, she's revived the blog Keep It Pitching In, and it's great. It's just mostly articles about church history, but she covers all sorts of things about church history and church culture. Anyway, she's now a columnist with the Trib, which I think is great. I'm glad that she's getting paid to do what she's very, very good at. And, again, as an amateur / semi-professional historian, she's made great contributions to a lot of stuff that we know about church history. Anyway, so everybody, if you have a Trib subscription, you should definitely be checking out Artist Partial's columns. She's great.
I'm excited to see her come on board. I think that's a kind of a coup for the Trib, quite frankly. I mean, this is really smart. You get rid of Kirby, which is great news.
Yeah.
And then you bring on someone much better.
Well, and also, I don't know if you follow Eli McCann on Twitter. He is culturally raised Latter-day Saint, not active in the church. To be, he's married to a man. He's a gay Latter-day Saint. But he gained quite a following on Twitter because he's a good writer. He tweets. He's a lawyer by profession. I don't know if he has a specialty, but he practices law. But he's a very capable writer, and he's very entertaining. And he's also recently been given a column by the Trib, and he sheds some interesting insider / outsider perspectives on LDS culture and Utah culture.
Yeah, I've seen some of this stuff.
Anyway, so the Trib, I think, has been kind of branching out into these more cultural, historical, etc. People who bring a new voice to the Trib, which I think is great. I think it's beneficial. What was that? What was the rim shot? There you go.
There we go.
Charge.
So here is a piece by our friends at LDS Living, and
I think we should close on this.
All right, I'm good with it. So the article is called "How to Use the Chosen," the show, as you teach the New Testament. Mind you, the article is not called "Should you use the Chosen as you teach the New Testament?" It's just telling you how you should go about it. If you haven't been following the Chosen, it's a much loved, semi-fictitious depiction of Christ's ministry during New Testament times. It is produced, I believe, by Angel Studios, which is owned by VidAngel, but in partnership with a number of evangelicals and others. It's not produced by the church. Yes, Latter-day Saints are involved. It has actors who are not members of our faith, who, if you look on their IMDb page, they do other normal acting stuff. It's very popular though. I mean, I think they show a couple months ago they did a Fathom event thing, and you could watch the first 2 episodes of it in the theater, and it was the number 3 box office film, quote unquote, for that weekend, which was a big thing. The Chosen's a good show. We're not going to dispute that. It's a good show. It's a great way to spend your time. I think it's a perfectly safe thing to do as a family. And we're talked about good content to watch. By all measures, it's a good, well-made, lovingly made show. However, it is not a church-produced show. And it does take some liberties here and there with just, the life of Christ and some of the characters. Of course it does. It's dramatizing this entire thing. It has to. If you stick to strictly what it says exactly in the New Testament, you're going to have something closer to the Bible video series, which are great that we made, but those are 4-minute vignettes to get through some of this great story. So my main issue here is we talk a lot about official church sources in class, and I've been in enough meetings where there's people in leadership concerned about folks bringing outside stuff into classes, how dare you use that random study about something that talk about the church that wasn't commissioned by the church. Why are you bringing Pew data into this lesson? What's that all about?
Well, you don't forget that. I mean, I've taught a lot of Sunday school and Elders Quorum lessons, and I've used outside sources, but I carefully review them. But commentaries that are not, that might be, available at Deseret Book, but not official church manuals, or even commentaries and sources and study Bibles that give contexts that are not published by the church. I think there's a place for all of those things.
Yeah, I'm with you there too. I'm with you too.
But the Chosen.
But I'm trying to abide by the church's own edicts here. That's what I'm saying.
Sure. Oh yeah, especially if you're going by the church's own edicts. Yeah, and this is LDS Living, which is owned by the church? I do
Yes.
believe. Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
So, and again, that doesn't necessarily mean this is official church commentary, but still, in a publication owned by the church, like you said, they're not starting with the question, should you use the chosen? They're saying how to use the chosen. It's like, well, strictly speaking, you should not.
You expect to see how to use Bible videos of the Book of Mormon series in your class, sure,
Right.
which should be painfully obvious because they link to them right in the app.
Right, and I'm
Um,
hesitant to use those too. I just like some of the we were talking about this before the show. Just like it's kind of weird that like Jesus keeps changing throughout the different
this okay,
videos.
I do not understand it. Considering we made the whole Bible video series, which took a long time. These are multi-year endeavors, and we're still doing the Book of Mormon series. But now they've published the clips from Third Nephi, so the Savior shows up, and I admit, like, I'm not like the biggest fan of like the Jesus they got for the Book of Mormon. It's kind of, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. It's
But
too cheesy. The point is, well, yeah, why not use
there's
the
no
same one? Like,
consistency.
is this not like the shared universe of the scriptures as produced by our church? Like,
Well,
why
also
don't we get the same
my
actor?
my nitpick. I think there is a lot that's commendable about the Bible videos. I do like some of them very much about how they can kind of bring some of it to life. Just
Yeah,
to see actors portraying what's being, speaking what's written and doing it in a way that's interpretive and just feels real. But my nitpick is, and they especially do this with some of the Jesus actors, is that there's like this weird like elevated British accent,
yeah.
and it's like here these are like literal salt. I mean, not literal, but you know what I mean. Like these are, the origin of the phrase "salt of the earth" comes from these people, and they're supposed to be, from lowly backgrounds, sons of workmen, fishermen, etc. And here they sound like they're, you know, Empire officers working on the Death Star. And it's like
And in many instances, like, The Chosen is almost better in that sense because I think the
exactly. No,
actor
I
playing
love how,
Jesus,
yeah,
he does,
they sound like they have Hebrew, like Israeli accents, which is
and
entirely
a
appropriate.
lot of them also look it a bit more. That's one thing with
Well, the actor
our
who plays Peter, I believe he actually is Israeli. Like,
yeah.
and so they've gotten people who are ethnically appropriate, who are, yeah, and who speak with a little more, a little more rustically, a little more down to earth. Anyway, so yeah, I
Why
yeah
can't we kick that then? That's what I wonder. And our official church productions are still, Jesus is still pretty much a white guy,
yeah
you know?
yeah. Well, and that's one thing that you saw, that I think is commendable, but I mean, if not entirely well executed in the Book of Mormon videos, is that you saw them calling out for Native American and South, like Hispanic. That's not the right word. Like Latin.
Amerindian? Is that what you're looking
Yeah,
for? Or
Amerindian, and then Latino and Latina, and also Polynesian. They were these big calls for these
yeah,
ethnicities of actors because they were trying to portray darker skinned people for both Lamanites and Nephites, which would be more accurate. Like
yeah.
even if according to some of the texts in the Book of Mormon, the Nephites had fairer skin, they still would have been much more. These are people with an Israeli heritage, a
Oh,
Middle Eastern heritage.
when I read we read like the stories from the Book of Mormon, the classic, like, paneled storybook for my
Yeah, yeah,
kids.
yeah. Where they have really cool hats.
Yeah, and of course, I love to gloss over the part when the Nephites separate from the Lamanites, and then all of a sudden it shows the Lamanites they
They
look
just
like
they just turn dark. Yeah,
dark skinned, like
yeah,
savages, like in their loincloths
yeah.
and it shows them like
We
being
could
it
use
shows
an
them being
update to that
lazy.
book.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that. And then the Nephites, of course, are like, I mean, some of the depictions of them, I'm like, it looks like some guy they just yanked straight from like a general conference talk in the 80s
well,
and
and
just
some of them
put
have
him.
like dirty blonde hair and
Yeah,
stuff. Like, yeah.
it's like, so there's like no effort whatsoever.
So I was just saying, kudos to the church for, at least in the Book of Mormon videos, making a big effort to recruit darker skinned peoples and peoples that we believe are, we have been taught were descended from the Nephites and Lamanites. Like that's great. But you're right. Yeah, when we see Jesus, he's generally a pretty white. I will say there was what was it? There was a recent video and it's one of the newer Jesuses, and he had a very down to earth way of speaking. And at first, it kind of threw me because I was like, "Oh, he kind of sounds like he's from like Laguna Beach or something." But like,
Yeah, brah.
yeah, I mean, not quite like that, but like he just had this very casual, like, I don't know, but like I liked it because I was like, this feels a little bit more like a personable, down to earth, not above you with my elevated accent kind of a Jesus, and I like that. But he was also very very white. Anyway, you
Anyway,
should
back to
not
our
be using The Chosen because
so
it's the main thing to me is that it's highly fictionalized. like I think with the character of Jesus, and you still see little liberties taken here and there. Like they show him like working as a kind of a handyman, freelance, take a job here and there, carpenter to get by, and like, okay, that's definitely some creative liberty. But all of the apostles, we know nothing about these people. We know, out of the original 12, we know the most about Peter, and we still know nothing about him.
James and
And so,
John, tight.
again, and we know
Yeah.
a bit about them. We know their father's name. We know what they did for a living. We know a little bit about their personalities, but we have just next to no background. And so they've taken a lot of creative license to give each of the apostles some background and some personality and some just experiences that bring them to where they are. And I love that because, again, it helps kind of make things come to life. It makes things more relatable. I love the way they tell these stories and show Jesus developing and his gathering, and developing his teachings, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's a wonderful show. I highly recommend it to everybody who's interested. But I would never use it in a Sunday school context
Yeah. I
because
mean,
it's just full of too many things. It's like using the work and the glory to teach church history. Don't do it because there's just
that's
too
actually
much
pretty good.
fiction.
Pretty good
And there was
analog.
there was a good decade there where there were members of the church who thought the Steed family was like a historically real family, and they'd show up at church history sites and be like, well, "Where did the Steeds live?" And like, they didn't live anywhere because they weren't real. So I don't know. It's just like you said, it's a weird article because it's like, here's how to use it, and I'm like, no, no, no. Here's why you shouldn't use it. That's what the article should be called. Here's why you shouldn't use The
In
Chosen.
fairness, because there's the last section is actually called "How to Use Video Clips from the Chosen." It's like, oh my gosh, there's
Do not.
in some fairness, they do lead off and say you could show a video clip and then ask people to sort of like read the scriptures and say, okay, what does the scripture say and what was actually different in here? Why do you think the directors made the decisions they did?
You only
How
have
would you
45 minutes to teach this lesson.
how would
Don't
you
do that.
how would you film this scene differently? No. The problem is you have 45 minutes to teach this lesson. See, this speaks to the problem with our 2-hour block and how we've been so obsessed with leaving 50 minutes for our lesson. We don't need to pad the time, people. We really just need 35-minute lessons and then we move on with our lives. No one needs to be an elder scorn for 50 minutes. I mean, no one needs that. It's just not.
I see what you're saying, but like from the perspective of a former gospel doctrine teacher, I found my class time precious because by the time everybody comes and sits down and everything, yeah, you've got more like 35 ish minutes left, and it's like, I'm not going to do a new media film analysis in comparison with
And
the
that's the weirdest
scriptures.
part because what do you gain spiritually if you break it down and say
Nothing.
what would you do differently? How would you do this differently if you were directing? I'm like, what does that have to
No,
do with my understanding of the scripture and
let's
my
just
relationship
go.
with Christ? Like, no.
Let's look at the words that Jesus spoke and talk about those, and ignore comparisons with film or whatever, like directorial choices, script choices, whatever. Like, no, 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 no. Like, there's so much great content to cover, and and like I said, I'm all for bringing in other sources, to give historical context, to give commentary, to give perspectives. But I think taking a highly fictionalized film adaptation and making it a part of your lesson is like, there's no place for that not in my classroom if I'm teaching anyway.
Amen, brother.
But
Well,
I'm
Jared,
I'm an activity days leader, so this doesn't come up.
fun.
It is fun.
I think we've done a good job burning plenty of bridges tonight. Really, just hating on lots of people. So I've appreciated the time. Here we've
But there
covered
was
great
love.
things.
But there was love in our hate. There was love
Yeah,
in our hate.
yeah, we've done great things, Jared. This has been terrific. What a fun time.
I hope Kurt brings us back soon.
You're gonna think again about having me on, Kurt Frankham. We'll see.
So this coup, I guess, was unsuccessful. I don't think we're taking over.
$10 says this episode never sees the light of day, and there's just gonna be like some other random episode that Kurt scrambles to put together tomorrow, and that's what's gonna happen.
Or it's highly edited, and there's just like it's a 15-minute, just really just bare bones conversation of like 3 things that we mentioned.
Let's be like, hey, a temple in Puerto Rico. That's super, super, super cool. I'd never watch R-rated movies. Absolutely not. And you have to say
we love Sister Hales. The end.
Something like that. Folks, I believe Patreon's still a thing. So if you go to patreon.com/thisweekinmormons, Kurt is actually way better than I ever was at trying to offer up forms of exclusive or early content for supporters on Patreon. So if you want to go in there and kick in a couple bucks a month, it helps the overall project do its thing. I think you can go to thisweekinmormons.com. I don't know if they're like writing articles there. I don't think they are. I think they're just publishing the posts. So you can still go there and of course follow this show on social media, primarily on Facebook. You can if you want to be on Twitter, but then you're like on Twitter and the Book of Musk, as it were.
The Book of Musk. That's the other. Oh man, you have 3 great titles for this episode.
The Book of Musk. Can we could do a whole episode on how the Book of Boba Fett was an absolute disaster, but that's a whole other thing. That's
There was the one episode that was, or 2 episodes that was basically just episodes of The Mandalorian that were pretty good.
Andor though.
Oh my gosh, I finally watched Andor.
So good, and no one knew about it. It's
oh my gosh,
good.
It's the best Star Wars we've had since Rogue One, and that's the best Star Wars that we've had since The Empire Strikes Back.
Like Andor came out with such less fanfare than all the other, than like Obi-Wan and Boba Fett. Andor is the best thing they've done. Like,
I
down.
love it. I love it. I'm so excited that we're getting another season of that.
Anyway. Well, that's good. I'm also excited about the restored gospel and to be a member of the church. So thanks for listening, everybody. It's been real. Great to catch up with all of you, and hope you have a fantastic time for your week. Whenever this is live, I don't know these things. Anyway, Jared, it's good seeing you, man. Thanks for doing
good to see you too. Thanks for asking me back for your brief comeback episode.
Don't call it a comeback. All right, folks. For Jared, I'm Geoff. I'm going to do my old sign off. You be well, be holy, and be happy. This has been Twim. Bye-bye.